that is still being bounced back and forth between the House and Senate in the Iowa Capitol. It's Senate File 496. It deals with transparency and parents' rights. The Senate passed the governor's recommendation, and that was then sent over to the House. The House made a number of changes to that legislation, so now it will go back to the Senate, and they will try to work out what stays and what goes. So there are a number of very important aspects to that, so we're keeping an eye on it to see what happens. There are a number of other bills that are still alive that will have some impact on us, but that the governor's transparency and parents' rights is probably the major one that we're watching right now. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Director Borchin.
Yeah, I was able to attend a seminar that was put on by the Iowa Association of Alternative Educators that featured Speaker Jonathan Mooney, that spoke a little bit about looking at disabilities as differences, not as disabilities. Was really happy to see the number of teachers that we had from across our system that were attending. It was a really great conference.
Yeah, wonderful. I think a lot of Metro staff helped coordinate that, and so they were in from around the state for 2 days. So.
And Maple Grove was strongly represented there too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other reports? Next, we will hear from those who have requested to address the board. Cindy, do we have any members of the public that have requested to address the board? Yes, we do. How many speakers do we have signed up for public comment?
We have 5 speakers tonight.
With 5 speakers this evening, you will each be given 5 minutes for your remarks. Please respect the time allotted to each speaker. Vice President Garlock will serve as your timer and indicate when your time has expired. The time is yours to use and may not be yielded to another speaker. If you have submitted a request to address the board and choose not to speak in the interest of equity and fairness, your time may not be yielded to another speaker. In order to abide by the Open Meetings Law, there will be no dialogue between board members and the public during this time except to clarify the nature of questions or comments from the individual speaking. We ask that the audience and speakers refrain from using inappropriate language and outbursts as a matter of respect for all in attendance. This board has zero tolerance for profanity, vulgarity, demeaning language, or threats of any kind. Lastly, I'd like to remind our speakers that the board is unable to address personnel or student matters. There is a process outlined in board policy which provides guidance on how to address and resolve concerns. We ask that the speakers refrain from using personal names and information during public comment. Before we begin, we'd like to remind our speakers to please state your name and address for the record when called to the podium. Cindy, can you please call our first speaker?
Our first speaker is Deb Fries, and she'll be speaking on the topic of Regulation 602.9.
Good evening. My name is Deb Fries, and I live at 2526 31st Street Southwest. I'm here to discuss Regulation 602.9, which is regarding high school student athlete transfers within the Cedar Rapids Community School District. It was created in 1978, 45 years ago. A lot has changed in our world and in our schools in 45 years. A big part of the regulation says, for those just to familiar with, any student who permits to a school other than the school assigned to their residence may not play at the varsity level.
One moment, sir. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There we go.
The time hadn't started, so just, yeah, apologize.
Sorry.
Apologize, yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
They can't play at the varsity level for 365 days from the first day of attendance. 9th and 10th grade students are only eligible to play on grade level. However, if that team does not have a full grade level schedule, the student must play at the sub-varsity in that particular sport. One of our most recent changes in the state of Iowa is a bill that was signed into law last June, and it's called the School Choice Law. On January 24th of this year, the Des Moines Register interviewed Kim Reynolds, who said, "Public schools are the foundation of our educational system, and for most of the families, they'll continue to be the option of choice. But they aren't the only choice. And for some families, choosing a different path may be better for their children. Kim Reynolds and our state legislators have changed with the times. Why then does Regulation 602.9 not be changed or removed? When parents make the decision to have their children attend a public school in Cedar Rapids Community School District, but outside of their home boundaries, why are the student athletes penalized by having to sit out a varsity sport for 365 days, even when the student athlete is qualified? If a student is bullied at another school, a private school or an in-district school, and the parents have their kid transferred to another school, why is the student athlete penalized to sit out for a varsity sport? When a parent decides to send a student to another community school because their sibling is a special needs child, why then is that sibling penalized by not being able to play varsity sports for 365 days? When a parent decides to send their child to another Cedar Rapids school because their child has extreme anxiety, depression, or was in foster care, why is that student athlete penalized? And finally, when parents decide to send their children to another community school and their child ends up making a varsity team at a school in the fall semester, and they're able to play because the AD approved it, but then in the spring they make a varsity team and then they say she can't play, you know, it's just all really confusing. When students are in band or in show choir and they leave a private school like Xavier or they leave any other school, show choir kids aren't penalized. They don't have to sit out for 365 days. Band members aren't penalized, only the student athlete. The NCAA used to have they used to have the students sit out of college for a whole year when they transferred. That rule is gone. That rule is ancient. It's called the portal, and now these college students, they don't even have to sit out a year. So why are our high school students have to sit out a year? And I saw in the paper the other day that your enrollment is dropping. Well, my sister's daughter went to Xavier. She could have went to Kennedy next fall, and they're moving, and they're gonna send their child to Mount Vernon. They have 3 children that could have been in the Cedar Rapids School District, and they're moving to Mount Vernon because they don't want their daughter to have to sit out for 365 days. She already has a couple scholarship offers, and she doesn't have the time to waste. While I know you can't answer all of my questions tonight, this is why I'm here, to see if we can amend this regulation or maybe just get rid of it. And I'm just here for someone later to get back to me, like, how do we at least have this discussion? Because I brought this up many times and I'm not getting anywhere. So I thought I've talked to the AD, I've talked to many people on this over here, and it's just very frustrating. So,
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Peter Gorell, and he's going to speak about churches, 501c3.
Thank you. I can't talk about everything, but I want to marshal the forces of good of our churches, something many of them don't know about, but Lyndon Johnson, we could think about, I think before 1954, churches had the tax advantage. They didn't have to pay taxes on their property. Till Lyndon Johnson, I believe he stepped in July 2nd of 1954, he said,